Hey guys, I know it's been a while since I did a video, but fuck, I've just been busy. Maybe we'll cut through the bullshit. Get a motor dropped off from a guy in, I think he's from New Hampshire. Yeah, New Hampshire. I think he found me through YouTube, I'm not positive, but I think that's the case. Supposedly it's a 3D3 that he bought. He put it in his 60s Camaro, and I guess it doesn't like to rev much more than 3,500. And he chassis dynoed it and it put down 240, I think, to the rear wheels. Now, supposedly it's a 3D3. And as you see, it does have a 400 balancer. It's got a counterweighted flex plate. So either this is a piss poor built 3D3 that's got a stock crank, 400 crank in it, because it's externally balanced, not internally balanced. Or this guy got fucked and somebody threw the balancer and flex plate on a 350 and said, here you go. Now, a few things I see, he's got head bolts that are one-time use only bolts, like for an LT. The wrong gasket. We're going to tear it apart and see what it's got. It's got nice heads. They're Canfield heads. Kind of a waste for what this guy wants to do, but whatever. Nice intake. It's a dual plane. It's got a textured floor for atomization. It's got roller rockers on it. I don't know what brand. I haven't really looked. But anyway, the first step's tear it down and see what the goofy shit that I can find, what's wrong with it. I'll CC the heads, because he doesn't know nothing about compression, nothing on this thing, so we're going to figure it out. And we're probably going to replace the crank rods, pistons, because he kind of wants to do a 6-inch rod motor. So, if the money is there, we're gonna beef this fucker up a little bit. Shouldn't be a problem for what he wants to spend. Then we're gonna dyno it, then give it back to him and have him put it in his car. So, more to come as I tear it down. Hey guys, he got one head off. I'm seeing flat tops, but I'm not seeing an oversized side stamped on them. So I'm going to have to measure. Not that I wouldn't anyway, but normally an aftermarket oversized piston is stamped the size, like .030. Found a broken rocker jam nut. You see the top fucking half is busted right off. That's usually from tightening your lock nut too tight. They don't need to be Hong Kong tight. Because the heat, they expand, and sometimes that will happen. Then I get a feeling these are cheap because there's no names on them. So these are probably Pro Comp or Pro Form maybe. But anyway, that's what I found. That somebody put small springs in the heads, but that ain't no big deal. Okay, I have found something here. How well you can see it. Right there you should be able to see that there's a gap between the checking tool and the valve tip. This motor has push rods in it that are too long. And they are engine work 7.9. They're 83,000 over stock. So that's one problem that's going to have to be fixed. Hey guys, get the motor apart. As you can see, we got odd wear from too much timing. It looks like maybe a slightly bent rod where it's an uneven wear. You can see the taper. All of them are like that. Just too much timing, which causes detonation and it hammers down on the piston, which in turn pushes it onto the fucking crank. Now you can see the odd wear patterns and all the copper showing. This motor wouldn't have lived much longer. Somewhere there's a main shell. As you can see, it was just too much. The clearances are too tight. Dirt in the oil. You know, they're all scored to shit. The crank is junk. Not that it matters. I mean, we're doing a 3D3 with a scat kit. But for that cast crank, to turn it and to rebalance it, you're talking probably around $400. Where you can buy a brand new cast crank for like $180, 200 bucks. The block is cracked. I'll take you out and show you that. There's a block I just come back from the machine shop. Did a quick clean on it. You can see something, either like a head gasket was leaking or something got spilt. Let me flip this. I don't know how good you're going to be to see it. But see where the rust is forming here? There's a hairline crack from here to there. It's right through there. I don't know if this camera's going to pick it up or not. But yeah, there's the crack. Well, it's a customer's motor. I don't want to take a chance of doing a repair on it. And there's several ways you could repair that. If it was mine, for my car, I'd repair it. But I don't want to take the chance of the customer's car. So anyway, I went and got him another block, and I dropped it off the machine shop, picked this one up. So we're going to bore that one out, line hone it, deck it, do everything to it, and get him going. But yeah, this is why you have to be very cautious when buying a used motor off of, Craigslist or whatever. This happens even when you're buying the cheap crate motors through like Summit, like the fucking Blueprint motors or whatnot. This stuff can happen. They're just kind of half-assed thrown together. But like if you're gonna do a Bill Mitchell crate motor or a shaft off, this stuff you won't find happening. Hey guys, just got back from the machine shop, picking up the 3D3 stuff. Block is all done. As I mentioned earlier, the original block the guy dropped off was cracked. So I found him another block and had it machined, and we're good to go. Even though this has been at the machine shop, they've thoroughly cleaned it. This block has been cleaned 3 times. It's your job, well, up to the builder's job, to make sure it actually is clean. Which means blowing compressed air through all the oil passages, scrubbing down the cylinder walls, make sure all the dirt, all the grime from machining is out of it. Little note, when you're taking motors apart, they gotta go back the way they were. Like these caps, 1 through 5 position, they gotta go back on. Like you can't put this cap there, and vice versa. So it's common to mark them. As you can see, number 2 cap right here has 2 dots that somebody punched in it to mark it. I don't like marking in this area, because if this cap's going to fail, it's going to fail in this area. And truth be told, you could actually take a cutoff wheel and slice the piece right out of here, and this cap is still going to survive. So when I mark them, I tend to mark them here on the sides. I don't know, I just sleep better at night doing that. Oh, and I found a good use for my tool cart finally. Spent years as a technician, mechanic, never used that cart once. But it works good for putting engine shit on. As you can see, I think, hopefully you can see it. And where the fuck was I? Oh yeah. Now when you pull a motor apart, if you look at your bearing saddles, you're going to see they're smooth. Like this. Now if you take this to the machine shop and you pay them to line hone it, you should get it back with crotch hasses. I really don't know if those will show up good. But basically, in a nutshell, that should look like it's cylinder wall that's been honed. If not, they didn't do it. That's why it's very important to either know what the fuck you're doing, looking at when you're doing this, or find a machine shop that you know that will do the work and you can trust them. Because if they fuck you and you don't know it, you're going to put a motor together and it's not going to be right. So, anyway, I'm going to get it cleaning. Then I'll probably paint it. And then start putting it together. Okay, now I blew this all out. Now the first step is all down the cylinders and your lifters. You know, the valley and the fucking lifter bores. Now the next thing I do, and it's very important you do this, is chase all the fucking thread holes. Now I know you're thinking, oh, I just took a bolt out, it's got to be clean. No, not how it works. As you can see right here, I can't get that chaser down in there. Now you don't want to use tap and dies because they'll actually cut and fuck up your threads, give you a loose fit. You want to go out and buy these thread chasers. It's a thread corrective kit. Just go to Craftsman. Because technically if you get on Snap-on truck and you buy that kit for an ungodly amount of money, it's the same fucking kit that you're getting through Craftsman's. So yeah, I just put the air to it, wind it in, wind it out. And clean the chaser, every fucking hole. Another note from that first video when taking this apart, so you had the one-time use bolts. This has ARP bolts now. And another important factor when you're doing shit like that, when this is boarded home to the deck plate, the ARP bolts have to be used because they're a different torque spec. If you use stock bolts, you get your block back and you decide, oh, I'm going to put ARPs in it. You're going to change your bore hole once you torque it down. You're no longer going to have a round one. Same with your mains. If you line hole them with factory bolts and you decide, oh, I want that extra fucking security, so you put ARP bolts in it, your line bore is going to be out of whack now because they're a different torque spec. That has to be line holed with the bolts that you're going to use. So anyway, I'm going to shut the fuck up and I'm going to chase these threads. Okay, we got all the holes chased. There was a couple bad ones. Not so much the threads are bad, but the problem is they all go blindly into water jackets. When I mean blindly, there's no bottom to them. They just go into a water jacket. So what happens, your factory bolt, say it ends right here, from here down it gets rusty. So you take a new bolt that's a little bit longer maybe, and you try to torque your head down and it hits that rust, that throws off your torque measure. So you're not actually torquing your part down, you're just binding it up with dirt, rust, shit. Another quick note, this block was zero decked. And that means the pistons will be level the deck. And for you people that don't have anyone to measure this stuff, when you get your block back, if you still have your numbers on your block, it's not zero decked. We were just going to leave a 5/1000 deck on this. So in theory the piston would have been down in the hole 5/1000. But the deck didn't clean up, so we had to zero deck it. So it did clean up with a zero deck. So everything's equal, side to side, front to back. It's squared up. That's how fucking out of whack it was from the factory. We had to zero deck it to get it straight. Next thing I gotta do is file fit the rings. Now in the past videos I've done, I've had people like send me messages and stuff about ring gaps and how come I didn't show me actually sitting down, file fitting the rings and then doing the ring gap. Quite simple. I don't want to like mislead somebody. Like say I put this motor at 25 thousandths ring gap, where you're using a different piston or a different application, you might want less ring gap or more. So I don't really want to get into talk too much about that and have you carve in stone that, oh, this is what I need for a ring gap. Well, no, actually you don't. But a rule of thumb, if you have anywhere between 20 and 30, you should be safe. The best thing to do, and I'll show you here, is when you buy pistons, because these hypertechnics, they're not forged, they're not cast, they're kind of both. Well, what happened is these don't really absorb heat like, say, a forged piston, so they expand less. That's why you can run these tighter in the bore. Like these go in probably around a 2,000ths wall clearance, where like an old TRW needs 5,000ths wall clearance. That's why the forged pistons, when you start them up, they're colder. You can hear them clatter a little bit. It's your skirt smacking off your fucking cylinder wall. Where these fit tighter, they can't rock. But the only problem with that is where these don't absorb the heat, they reflect the heat. So even though the ring is quite a ways down from the top of the piston and away from your actual heat of your combustion, where the piston's not absorbing it, it's going to reflect it back into the ring. So hyperprotected pistons, in theory, need a bigger ring gap. Now, the old school was X amount per bore size. Like, say, a 350, it was 18,000ths. But if you try to use that on a fucking hyperprotected piston, you go out and feed this thing a hot supper, you could bite your rings up and bust a piston. So, when it comes to your ring gaps, read the paperwork, put it into what the piston manufacturer wants you to put it in at. And as you can see, they want on a 4-inch bore multiplied by 65 gap factor, which for a 4-inch bore is a 26,000 ring gap, which seems pretty high to a lot of people because they're used to using like a cast piston or a forge, which will absorb heat and not direct it into the ring. Because as you heat metal, the more you heat it, the more it expands. And you look over here, street and actually aspirated, they want a 65,000ths. To me, that's a lot. So that's why I don't, like in the past, sit down and show you what, watch me file fit the top ring to say 25,000ths. Because I don't want you doing that to your motor and it not be right. So do your homework. Call your piston manufacturer if you have to. Find out what they recommend the ring gap for. So yeah, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to file the rings. And I mark them. The piece of tape, wrap the tape around the ring, mark it, what cylinder it is, put them back in the box so I know what hole they go into when it comes time to put the motor together. So I'm going to sit down and do that. It takes a little while to do, but I will show you on doing it because there is a couple things you got to know. Okay, I got the rings out and I got one squared into the bore. Now, the paper that came with the rings, this is why it's important that you kind of pay attention to things. On these clearances that they give you, those are the recommended minimum. So basically, in theory, if they tell you have to have, say, 18,000ths, and you say, I got 17, that's close enough, there's a chance those piston ends are actually going to touch and do some damage, but at 18 they won't, or they shouldn't. That's why they those distances are the bare minimum. You have to have at least that when you're doing these. Now, remember I mentioned about bore size times something, and that's your general rule of thumb for ring gap, which is what they tell you with the paperwork on the rings. The Malley rings, street strip and circle. Your bore size, which this had to go, this is 40 over because the original block, if you remember, was fucked up, had bad bores. So we ordered a set, we ordered a stroker kit with 40 over pistons, then found the crack in the block, so I had to replace the block with a different one. So we had to bore this one 40. Had I known about the crack, this one would have been bored 30. Then we got pistons for it. But anyway, bore, which this one is 4 inches 40 thousandths times 0045, which comes out to 1818. Now you round up, call it 19 thousandths. So according to the ring company, these rings need at least 19 thousandths. So you put those in at 19 thousandths, and you think you're okay on these pistons. When you do the math on the... Now the piston people, they tell you to multiply the bore by 65. Which comes out to 2626, so you round up. You never want to go down, go up to the next size, which is 27 thousandths. There's quite a little difference there. So once you get that size, you figure, well, I need to have 27 thousandths. Bare minimum, nothing less. And where my fucking thing is. So we got the 20 thousandths feeler gauge, and as you can see, it won't go in. Those ring gaps are actually 24. So I've got to file them open. I don't have my tripod with me right now. It's at the house. So I'm going to sit down and do the rings all but the last one. And tomorrow when I bring the tripod in so I can set the camera up and use my hands for something other than hold my fucking camera, I'll show you about filing the ring. Hey guys, oh, hold on, let me fill this fucking... Okay, I want to show you about filing the ring. This is a moly filled ring. I don't know if it's going to show up here. Maybe a little bit. But if you look on the filled ring, your outer edges are dark, your center is bright, and you'll see the insides dark, and you'll see on the top it's bright. Now basically what a filled ring is this. You got your actual ring, then you get your filling. Now what happens when you're filing, if you start filing like that, you can actually chip and peel that filling out. So when you're filing a ring that's filled, you want to come in like that on it. Not like that, because you can flake some of that filling out. So that's something you gotta pay attention to. You gotta know. If it's not a filled ring, it doesn't matter. Now when I do them, I concentrate on the inside more than out here. And what I'm doing that for is I can put it down the bore, square it up, and come in here with a feeler gauge, because that's where you're coming into, and get my gap, then sneak up to the whole fucking process instead of just trying to get it all at once. Because once I get this gap, I'm just going to get this out here level with it. So it's easier to do it that way for me, and that's how I've always done it. And yes, this is a crude way. They make ring filers or whatever to do this for, but to me it's a waste of money, just a regular fine file and file it. Okay, now I get the ring squared up. I don't know if you can see it in the fucking camera, but that gap has a slight taper to it. Now when I check with the feeler gauge, I'm going about halfway through the gap of the feeler gauge. So now I've got to bring my front of the ring down to match the inside of the ring. Then I'm good to go. Okay, now I've got the gap right. What you got to do is from filing, you can leave kind of a burr on the edges here. So just make one pass on your edges. Take the burrs off, because you don't want any sharp burrs there. Okay, now, comes to squaring the rings up. This is all I use. The secondary ring on the piston. You could even use the first ring. I usually put the second ring on, bring the ring up to the top of the cylinder, then push it down till this ring hits your deck, and that squares it up. The only thing tricky about it is you got to keep the ring out of the groove all the way around. Yeah, you can buy a squaring tool, but you know, it's the piston and rings. They work. They're free. I don't have to go out and buy a tool for it. And it's that size. I don't have to buy a bunch of fucking different tools. Okay, now I want to show you something here. Here's the old piston that come out. This is a 5.7 rod, which is a 350 rod. The 400 rods are even smaller. So this is your typical small block Chevy rod. This is a 6-inch rod. Now if you notice, the pinhole is way up in the oil ring. Where this one's not, it still has a piece of the piston here as a shelf. The long rods, you got to put a shelf in. There's a dot in the shelf that goes down towards your pin, and what that does, it hits the edges and stops the fucking laying from rotating around. Now your oil rings, when you put them in, you want to make sure they don't overlap, connect in any way. They want to just butt up against each other on the ends. The expansion ring goes in first, and if you look, it's kind of hard to see, but the high spots are narrower than your low spots. And that low spot is for your ring, the actual ring to set into. That actually fits in like that. This goes in first after you put your land in. They're real simple. Put it in. Then your rings go on. Okay, now I'm going to do the secondary ring. Now to do this, you can spiral them on, kind of hard on the thumbs. You do it one fucking groove at a time. So basically, you would install it into your top ring groove, catch your edge with your thumb, peel it back out, start it in here, peel that, drop it down. Or you can spend a couple bucks on a pair of ring pliers. The rings sit in here and they catch them, spread them open, drop it down on the piston. The only thing, you got to hold your thumb here, because you got to hold tension on this fucking ring to keep them in the pliers. But as you can see, they work pretty good. And I think these came from Sears and they were like fucking $5. So they're well worth it. You know, the rings are brittle. They do break easy. So if you new guys, I would suggest getting a pair of these from wherever, Sears. I don't know if Harbor Freight has them or not, but Fuck Summit probably has them. You get them in a lot of places. Okay, I got my top rings all filed. Now what I normally do, take a piece of tape, pull the ring out, wrap the tape around it, and just mark it with the cylinder that it came out of. Real fucking simple. Now, if you don't know your cylinders, all you got to do is mark them so you know what pistons they go on. But basically it's all even, odd, except for Ford. Fords are odd. They're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. These are 2, 4, 6, 8, 1, 3, 5, 7. Okay, a little note on the top ring. There shouldn't be an issue because they come with paperwork, tell you what's what. Most of them are marked on top of the dot. Like this one says top right on it. If you can see it or not. See the writing? It's got an M top. M is for Malley. Like I said, most of them have a dot. Dot goes up to the top of the piston. And if they're not marked, most of them, if not all of them, I don't even see it, have a bevel on the inside of the ring. They're not square. They're not made like that. If you were to fucking cut them or break them, you would notice they have a bevel on the inside. And what that bevel does is it allows your cylinder pressure to go in behind the ring. Because as that piston's coming up, you're trying to trap cylinder pressure. And the more you can trap, the better that motor's going to go. And what happens is that cylinder pressure is try to escape. That piston's coming up, your pressure's trying to get somewhere, and it's going to go in between your ring gap, your landing gap. It's going to slide in between the piston and the ring top. And then it hits that shelf, and it fills the backside of this ring up, and it helps it expand outward, and that's what helps seat your rings. Okay, a little note on the top ring. There shouldn't be an issue because they come with paperwork, tell you what's what. Most of them are marked on top of the dot. Like this one says top right on it. If you can see it or not. See the writing? It's got an M top. M is for Malley. Like I said, most of them have a dot. Dot goes up to the top of the piston. And if they're not marked, most of them, if not all of them, I don't even see it, have a bevel on the inside of the ring. They're not square. They're not made like that. If you were to fucking cut them or break them, you would notice they have a bevel on the inside. And what that bevel does is it allows your cylinder pressure to go in behind the ring. Because as that piston's coming up, you're trying to trap cylinder pressure. And the more you can trap, the better that motor's going to go. And what happens is that cylinder pressure is try to escape. That piston's coming up, your pressure's trying to get somewhere, and it's going to go in between your ring gap, your landing gap. It's going to slide in between the piston and the ring top. And then it hits that shelf, and it fills the backside of this ring up, and it helps it expand outward, and that's what helps seat your rings. Back in the old fucking days, they still do it at the track, you used to do what was called piston porting. And that's when you would take your pistons, and you would drill a series of holes in through your top of your piston. Just small holes. So when that was coming up, your cylinder pressure would go directly through them holes, right to the backside of the ring and push out really hard on the rings. But the problem with out on the street is what I just said, it pushes really hard on the rings, which will wear them out fast. So that was like a racing thing. Not recommended to do on the streets if you want to get in the car and drive a long time. Okay. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to go and make sure the valves ain't shrouded. If they are, the combustion chamber, I unshroud them. Now before you do this, if you plan on decking the head, you have to do that first. This might seem odd to some of you, that I'm going to be doing this. Now it's just shit trim black. Normally I just use a black fucking spray paint. And I know you guys are probably thinking, well, fuck it. Why would you spray on a nice clean cut head? One, it washes right off. Brake cleaner, fucking hose it right off. But you have to do this. You got to have them cut before you go in there and unshroud. Because what's going to happen? It's like, say you did this before you cut them. You put them on the block, scribed around your cylinder, removed your metal so they're unshrouded. Then you went in and had them cut. It's going to shrink that combustion chamber again, and then they're just going to be shrouded again. So, deck them first. These only had a clean cut. I think like 2/1000ths, 3/1000ths was removed off these heads to get them squared and clean. Okay, now in doing this, you don't need to geek out and put all your bolts in and torque them down. I just put one in the middle, snug, no gaskets. Let me flip this. Alright, now, I don't know how good you can see. Yeah, these ain't, well, now see right there, well, it's kind of hard to see the glare. But if you look, right there to the left of that valve, you'll see the cylinder is overhanging into the cylinder bore. You want to get rid of that. This exhaust side, as you can see, is good. Now, as you can see, this intake isn't as bad as this side. See, there's a big blob right there overhanging. This side's not bad. This side exhaust isn't bad. This side exhaust is perfect. Intake, it's got a big blob. This cylinder isn't bad at all, just a little spot there. This one's got a blob. This one, the exhaust is shrouded. This one's got a blob, but the exhaust is good. Intake side here has got a little bit, but it's not bad. The exhaust is pretty decent. Now, all you've got to do is go in with a tick, something pointed, and all you're going to do is lightly, all you're going to do is scratch that fucking paint off is all you're doing. You're not going in pressing and trying to make a groove in your cylinder or in your head. But you want to get the tip of your pick up against your wall, into the head, and just lightly run a circle around it and make a scratch in that paint. So when you take the head off, you're going to have a circle scratched into that paint. Okay, there it is, all taken off. As you can see, there's just a light circle around that now. So I know where the cylinder is in relation to the cylinder head and the combustion chamber. So any metal that's inside that circle gets removed right to that circle. Now, I've had people ask why not use a gasket. The hole in the gasket is bigger than the hole in the bore, so I wouldn't want to do that. As you figure, if your intake valve, if you open this up way out here to your gasket, that incoming air is going to come in, hit your block, and have to turn out around, then down into your bore. Same with the exhaust. That piston's pushing up, trying to push exhaust out, and if it hits this lip, it has to turn, then go back in, then out the exhaust. You don't want that. You want the shit to flow in and out nice and smooth and free as possible. Now, from this point out, I probably should have mentioned before, if you have a left-right head, you have to put it on in relation to that. So right now, these heads are left and right, and they're going to go back on that motor just the way I marked them for the cylinder bore, because that could possibly change. So for some of you guys who run the older motors, or have holes drilled, for your alternators and whatnot, make sure when you do this, you put that on the side it's going to live on. Okay. Been over this before, but I'll do it again. Aluminum. Cheap Harbor Freight die grinder. I think it was, $15 back in '98. The bits, they're snap-on, they're a little expensive, but if you're only doing this a few times, you can get them anywhere. As you can see, this is a very gnarly looking motherfucker. You don't want to get your knuckle caught on that. That's the aluminum bit. This one is finer. This is your iron bit. This is your hard metal bit. This is a soft metal bit. You use that on iron, you'll ruin it. You use that on aluminum, you'll plug it. Yeah, I got one done. No, you can see it. As you see, they're not shrouded. There's no overhang. Everything's all blended in. Now, you're not looking to go in there and redesign the combustion chamber. You just want to take those fucking lips out and blend it into your combustion chamber. It's only going to take you a few minutes. It improves the flow quite a bit. Definitely worth it. Okay, now it's time for gasket matching. Pretty much the same thing. Scrape around your gasket. Take the gasket off, and you'll see the marks on your head. Remove the material. The only thing is, people have a bad habit of mouthing it. And what I mean by that is they'll go in like this at an angle with a die grinder versus going straight in. You don't want to make a mouth. You want to take that metal away and blend it into your runners. So you're going to be grinding, way into your throat here, not just out here around the opening. But don't get carried away. Just remove the material. Now you can start off at an angle if you want, so you can go right to your lines, then blend everything into your runners. Okay, I'm getting ready to set the crank in. No sneaky voodoo here. Make sure your block is clean, your bearing shell is clean, and obviously the shell with a hole in it goes to the block. That's where the oil comes in. You get a half groove here. Rear seal. You'll see there's a lip. See if it's a better light for you. See that? You got a lip here. That goes towards your oil. Now I offset them. You can see that. I don't put them flush with the block. I offset it. Pretty straightforward here. Some grease, the crank in, some more grease, your bearing shells and your caps, and torque them down. This motor's already been mic'd for 2,000ths oil clearance. That's the preferred way to do it. If you guys ain't doing a lot, we're only going to do a couple. I recommend plastic gauge. It's really accurate, like within half a thousandths. Where mics, they get costly because you got to have a bore gauge to measure. You got to torque your caps down, measure your bore hole, and you need a mic so you can mic the bearing shell thickness. So that can get a little pricey. Plastic gauge, like I said, is extremely accurate. Hey, there's a little bit of grease in there. I don't know why, but I've seen people not lube the thrust bearing, which is fucking retarded. But other than putting it in here in your journal, you actually want to get it and grease up your fucking thrust surface. And the seal. Smear a little grease in there. I don't know what I did with the flashlight, so you really can't see that good, but... And this is the grease I use. If you're going to put the thing together and fire it right up, you can use oil. But I don't like to use oil because it runs off too quick. Sometimes I use STP oil treatment. That works pretty good. It stays in place. It's really sticky. Or, of course, the red assembly lube. That stuff sticks pretty good. But I prefer the grease. Here's a crank. It's a scat crank. Now you know it's new. Should be clean. It's been in my machinist. It's been, the balance has been checked. He's cleaned it twice, but still, it's the builder's responsibility to make sure it is clean. I use a brake cleaner, carbon choke, whatever. Now what you want to do is blow through all your oil journals. Inside your fucking journals here. Blow through all those, hit them with the compressed air, blow the whole crank off, then hit it with the compressed air. Make sure all your journals are clean. That's your responsibility as the builder. Okay, now you gotta check end play. To do this, install your rear cap first, which is your thrust bearing, which controls your end play. Then your front cap. You don't need to torque them down, but you can. Now after you do that, but before you torque it down tight, you want to take a rubber mallet and hit the crank forward and backwards a couple times. And what that's going to do is align your two bearing shells to make sure they are right. Then you're going to need to set up a dial indicator. You need a magnetic base. You need to set it up with a preload, then zero it out. Through there. And then you just pry the crank one direction, then pry it back. And what you're looking for is minimum of 5 thousandths. Anything less, you're going to want to take your rear shell apart, tape the two halves together, and sand them on like a piece of glass or something is flat, like a countertop, with like 180 grit paper. Few passes, then do like a 400 grit wet. Anyway, we're zeroed out. Now we'll pry the crank in the other direction. And as you can see, we got 5 thousandths. Actually, it's like 6 thousandths, but we're within specs. So that's good to go. Now I can put the caps on. Alright, now your cap bolts and your rod bolt, same thing. These are ARPs. Use the ARP lube. That's what the torque specs are rated for. You need to put some on the threads, the bottom of the washer, the top of the washer. Any friction spot, you need lube. If you don't do either one of these spots, you're going to create friction when you get up around 50 pounds. And that's going to drag on your torque wrench and throw your reading off. So instead of torquing it to say 70 pounds or 75, whatever they recommend, you're only going to be around 65, we'll say. So, again, lube on top, bottom of the washer, and the threads. Alright, now, on your caps, there should be an arrow. That arrow means point forward. If not, just remember the bearing tang always goes with the bearing tang. See the arrow points forward? Okay, and as you see, I got some paint on it finally. Now before you paint, you want to use an etching primer or an epoxy primer. The engine paint you use, I could give a fuck less. This is what I use. It goes on good. It covers fucking awesome. And I like the vibrant color. But it's nice to have this sitting around too. Or a good hair dryer. But take note, if you're going to use your old lady's hair dryer, the air vents that lets air into the dryer will suck up some of the overspray. So be ready to hear a bitch about that. As you can see, there's some overspray on the deck. Now the last video, there's a lot of fucking little bitches bitching about the fucking paint on the deck, which I washed off, just didn't video it. Because I like to think you guys have somewhat of a brain. I shouldn't have to hold your hand every fucking step of the way. But anyway, here's for you little bitches that were fucking whining about paint on the fucking deck, which doesn't do any harm. You could actually paint that deck and put your gasket on, and it would help seal the fucking gasket, just like a gasket sealer. But anyway, lacquer thinner, a fucking flammable brake cleaner, carb cleaner, spray it on a rag, and look, it washes right the fuck off. So for all you whiny little bitches that were fucking bitching about the last video, that fucking, yeah, get fucking paint on the deck, yeah. Here you go. Here's me washing the fucking deck for you. There, now you can get your fucking panties all unbunched. Okay. Now, when you're doing the overspray off the deck, make sure you get the cylinder walls. You don't want paint in there. Okay, now, if you guys are doing new rods, like this motor is, they're not going to be marked. Or if you're taking a motor apart and you're going to reuse your rods, they're probably marked somewhere, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And of course you'd put them back in the same fucking spot that they came from. New rods, of course, are unmarked. So, if you look at the rods, you'll see one edge here has a big chamfer. This side's not, it's pretty much flat. I don't know how good you'll show up in the fucking camera. But anyway, that side that's got the chamfer, that goes to your crankshaft. Because that's for the fillet on the crank. So when you look down the hole, you'll see that this piston and this rod, with that facing the crankshaft, is going to be right here against the crank. If you put it that way, it wouldn't be. So chamfer towards the crank, valve notches up. And they're symmetrical valve notches. There's not an intake or an exhaust because they're both the same size. So this would be number 1. And you just keep doing that, go right down the line. Valve notches up. We got a chamfer here that's facing the crank, so that one can go right there. Real simple. But if you fuck up and don't have that chamfer towards the crank, what you're going to do is you're going to not have enough rod side clearance, and it's going to bind up on you. Okay, now this is what I do. Just right on with the Sharpie. They're all in the locations. Now remember how if I'll fit the rings and marked them? Now I know what holes the fucking rings go into. And now I know what pistons are going to go on. Done deal. So, just going to put the rings on, lube them everything up, put it together. Alright, now I'm going to start putting the slugs in. You can geek out and you can buy the rod bolt covers and whatnot. You can put pieces of hose on the bolts. You just got to be careful not to nick your crank. Now, what I do is I set the deck up. The journal that I'm going on to down. So it's aligned with the cylinder. That way, when you put the piston rod in, the rod just naturally wants to hang straight over the crank. versus if it was down like that. So the top of the block was up, the rod would want to come in at an angle. So I mean, you just put this in naturally, the rod just naturally hangs straight down and doesn't want to interfere with nothing. Compressors. And again, as you've heard in my other videos, these are the way to go. Can't beat them. It's cut to size. It's tapered up top, so it's a tapered hole. The piston drops right into this, slides right out, nice slick as shit. Versus fighting with a band compressor. So it's worth buying these. They're pretty cheap. Fuck, everyone carries a Jag, Summit, everyone has them now. They even make one with a split, with a hose clamp around it, so it's adjustable for different sizes. I mean, these are made to size. Pretty straightforward from here. Lube up the cylinder walls. Piston ring gap orientation. On my top ring, I had the gap always facing up. Second ring, I'm usually down around 5, 7 o'clock, somewhere around there. I don't put it down. I don't put them opposite each other. I guess that's it. I mean, it's pretty straight fucking forward. Okay, here you can see the chamfer better. Let me get a fucking flashlight. And the reason for it. See how this one's almost straight? The side towards the crank's got that chamfer, and that's to give clearance for the raised fillet here on the journal. In the cap, you can see it better when you put the bearing in. See how the bearing comes out to one side almost all the way. The other side's shy. It stops at the beginning of the chamfer. And again, tang to tang. So that would put that chamfer towards the crank and not towards the other rod. Hey guys, while I'm waiting for the shop to heat up, because I got to paint something, I am tearing down a head. And the lighting sucks, but anyway, pop the valves out. I have found 1, 2, is it 3? Yeah, 3 broken seals. There's no hardened cups under the springs. Now, aluminum heads, you have to run a hardened cup, because if not, the spring's just going to eat into the aluminum because it's soft. And to get installed heights for your spring pressure, you need to shim them. Now, what you normally do is put your shims on, then you put the hardened cup in, then your spring on. Now, as you can see, most of these shims are wiped the fuck out because the springs have been pushing down through them. I'll get you over the light here a little bit. And just a gross amount of fucking shims too. But yeah, you can see where the springs have cut right through the shim. Now, there's someone calling on one of my videos about Pro Comp heads, I think it was that last stroker I did. Oh, you ought to save your customers some money and buy good heads, like darts. Okay, the Pro Comps are $700 fucking dollars. Bolt them on. Darts are twice as much, so I don't know how he figures they're going to save the customer money by spending twice as much on a fucking set of heads that I still have to do this to anyway. Because I have found as many fucked up dart heads as anything else. AFRs, road exit, don't matter. You're still going to go through them. Because it comes down to who assembled them. Now when I do this, you want to make sure your valves go back in the same fucking holes. Now if you remember, I marked the head, one of the heads left, so I know what side the motor goes back onto. So as I pull a valve out, like where I marked it, this first exhaust valve would be number 1. Same as the rings, I just marked left number 1 through 8. Now the other head, I'll just put a dot. Then I'll just mark it 1 through fucking 8 and put them right back in that same order. But I just wanted to show you that. I've got the cam coming, new springs, 10-degree locks and retainers. Oh, here's some more fucked up shims. And once I get those parts, we'll do some more. Hey guys, got all the cam stuff for this 3D3. It's a comp cam, extreme energy hydraulic roller. Street motors, I recommend hydraulics. Because mechanical, you gotta go in and do your valve lash every now and then. This is a fucking pain in the ass. And there's really no benefit nowadays other than maybe a couple RPMs higher on a mechanical, but on the street, seriously, when you over 6,500 RPM on a street. You got the 10-degree locks, the 10-degree retainers, the hardened cups for the springs, since the person that put those heads together didn't use any, they just had shims. Roller timing chain, the valve springs that are recommended for the cam, you know, the lifters. I run quality lifters now. I think I mentioned before, a guy trying to save some money, and we bought, I don't know, some off eBay. I don't remember what brand they were, but they weren't like a name brand like Crowler or fucking Comp, you know, Lenati. It was some generic thing made of the same metal that Comp made there, some or whatnot, and it didn't last. The fucking roller come apart. The bar broke. You know, the spreader bar. You can see it. It keeps the lifters from spinning in their bore and keeps the roller running on the cam in the right direction. Well, that broke. The lifter spun, took out the cam, so that kind of sucked. I had to pull the motor out, tear it apart, clean the metal out of it, put a new cam, lifters in it, push rods, but it's all good now. So him saving $100, I think it was like $100 from buying those other lifters. Actually cost him like $600. We had to buy another cam and fucking lifters. All this was just over $1,000. Right now I got left to buy is good rocker arms, and I got to mock up the cylinder and check for push rod length. Then I got to order push rods. The cam, I had to have it ground. It's not off the shelf. It's an off the shelf cam, like spec wise, but it's ground on a 900 base circle, so the rods won't hit it. I'll get into more of that later. Okay guys, getting ready to check the valve to piston clearance. Even though I know it's going to be fine because I've done this combination a few times before in the past. But for your sake, I'm going to do it, show you how to do it. You're going to need Play-Doh, mocking clay, craft clay, fucking, so you can buy Fire and Crafts, that type of clay. This is just dough, flour, water. Put them in your valve notches. And you need to go to the little hardware store and buy a couple weak springs or pusher springs. And that's going to replace your valve spring for now. And what that's going to allow you to do is put your lifters in, push rod, and all that stuff. crank the motor over, and this will work as a valve spring. It's going to allow the valve to open without collapsing your lifter if you're running hydraulics, and it will close the valve. So, and you need 2 springs to do your exhaust and intake at the same time. Okay guys, to do this you're going to need an adjustable push rod. That's the easiest way to do it, unless you've got a great selection of push rods. What you're looking for is, with a valve at half lift, you want the center of your rocker tip in the center of the valve. Kind of hard to see, but we're almost right there. A little bit longer on the push rod, and it'll be right dead in the center. And you can measure it with something simple as just a dial caliper. You can get jiggy with an indicator, set it up, magnetic base, but the problem with that is you have to be right straight. Any angle on it is going to throw off your reading. So I tend to use the dial caliper, measure my installed height, and subtract the half of the lift from that. And just go in and set it right down in the cup area. So, anyway, I got my push rod. As I said, I'm going to lengthen it a little bit and roll it again, make sure I'm right dead center. Then once I am, I can take it apart, measure the push rod length, and order the ones I need. And when I take it apart, I'm going to see if the valves touch that dough that's in there, and if it is, I'll cut it open and see what I have for clearance. Hey guys, as you can see, the valve just barely touched that fucking dough. So we got plenty of clearance here. If I can find a razor blade, I'll show you what to do. Now say you did this, and you pulled the head back off, and you see a pretty good impression in your putty. All you gotta do is take a razor blade and slice it open. Let me put you down for a second. Now right through the deepest apex, you want to slice that open and remove it. As you can see, we got plenty of clearance. There's, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch there. And you were looking for roughly 100 thousandths minimum. So there's plenty of room there. So, and that's all there is to that. Okay guys, getting ready to do the heads. I've got one already assembled. Now, to do this, you're running a roller cam and some flat tappet mechanicals, you're going to need a good compressor. The handheld squeeze fucking ones, they're not going to do a fucking roller spring. Even if your dick beaters are strong enough, the manual, the frames in the manual ones just won't take it. Okay, the first step is cleaning them. Now these have already been through a parts washer and scrubbed with a brush. So what I'm doing now is coming into a brake cleaner and making sure I get all the little nooks and crannies. And you'll see the stuff built up here and there on them, especially in your bolt holes. You want to get all that shit out. You don't want that floating around in a new motor. So go in there and when you see that shit, loosen it up. Just magma. It's nothing fucking drastic, but there's magma in there that you don't want pumping around in your new motor. So all these little nooks and crannies and crevices and hard to get spots, go in there and loosen all that stuff up. See the big chunk come out right there. then once you've done all that, then you go into the brake cleaner and blast all those areas. Get all that shit out of there. Brand new heads, you shouldn't have anything to worry about, but it's a good idea to rinse them off with some brake cleaner before you put them on a motor. Get rid of any machine work stuff. Because you don't want to take any chance of that stuff getting in your motor. Now I'll blow these off with an air hose. Okay, the first step, if you remember, these didn't have cups for the springs. All you had was shims. Now, you got to remove your seals. Like you see, it's just a guide poking up. This one's got a seal on it. And because to get the cups in, they won't go over a seal. So you got to pop the seals, replace them with new ones. Don't reuse them. They're cheap. Don't be a cheap fuck. Then once you do that, you got to put your valves back in the same hole they come out of, and you got to measure for your height so you get the correct spring pressure. Now you might have to shim them, and if you do, your shims go underneath your cups. They go between the head and your cup. Now you guys in the streets, you know, a few thousand shim to get your height correct, which is going to get your spring pressure correct. It's really not a big deal. You're not going to notice it. So technically you could just throw these together and not measure your spring height and be fine. But if you guys are racing, like full-blown racing a lot on the weekends, you might want to go through the procedure of checking the height. I don't know where the fucking thing is. And there's a couple ways you can do it. You can get by with a dial indicator. If you got a good eye, you can measure from the cup up to your retainer. You can put that down in there and just eyeball the bottom of that retainer to the edge of the indicator. Or you can do it the right way and buy a height mic. This is specifically for measuring valve height. And it just screws apart and adjusts. So it's kind of a time-consuming procedure. So I'm going to sit down and do that. I'll shim it as needed. As you remember, I pulled shims out, so I got shims. If you got to buy shims, they're cheap. The packet is like, I don't know, $5-10 bucks. They're not expensive. They got all various different thicknesses. It's nice to have the assortment on hand, which I do have. And that's from pulling all these heads apart through over the past 30 years. I don't remember the last time I've had to buy shims. But anyway, I'm gonna sit down and do all that. There's nothing to see. So, and as you remember, I marked the head. I've got the valves all labeled, so I know what hole they come out of. You don't want to mix that up, because the guides are clearance to the valves, and you don't want to mix them up. If you get one tight and it hangs up on you, you're all done. I think that's it for now, until I start assembling. So anyway, I'm going to measure all the heights, get the string pressure right, and I'll be back. Okay guys, here's the procedure. You get your valve, it's clean, ready to go. Some grease on it. I like to use the assembly grease instead of oil. It doesn't run off, stays in place. How good you can see, but Put the valve in. Now, the next thing is the seals. Now if you notice, some are in your gasket kit, they're in your valve parts, like with the locks, retainers, and whatnot. In with your seals, most likely. You're going to see this little plastic condom looking thing. That goes over the tip of your valve. Smear a little goo on it. Then there comes a seal. Now what this does, it protects the inner part of your seal from your lock groove so it doesn't tear up the seal. These go on kind of hard. You're going to have to muscle it on. Put your thumb on it and kind of wiggle and jiggle a little bit and you'll feel it go on your valve. Hold the valve shut, slide your seal on, then you can pull your little plastic condom off. Then you got to push that seal on your guide. You're gonna have to use a little bit of muscle, but it's not bad. There it is in place. Now the next, your spring. Your retainer. And your locks. And before you put your locks on, you need to compress the spring. There it is, compressed. Now you can put some grease in these and now hold them in place versus taking the risk of getting your fingers pinched, but I don't know, the pinch is good for you now and then. It's really not that bad. There it is installed. And there you go. That's how you do the fucking heads. Now I'll give these a final rinse before they go on the motor. In the valve area, the combustion chamber area, the runner area, I want them clean before they go on. So it's brake cleaner and an air hose. I want to talk to you about retainers and stuff. I have nothing to write with right here. So let's take a walk. Now earlier in the video I mentioned the retainers. I took out the 7-degree retainers and replaced them with the 10. And what that is the angle of the retainer. You got your center angle, call it the center line of the valve, and your retainer, and your lock. Now, as you can see, the top is thinner. The bottom's thinner than the top. Right? We'll call this a 7-degree. Now, a 10-degree, in comparison, is more like that. You know, it's a wedge. That's all it is. And the hole in the retainer is the same. Well, you can mix them, but it's not recommended. Like you could actually use a 10-degree lock and a 7-degree retainer, and be fine. It's not going to pull through. Where if you try to use a 7-degree lock and a 10-degree retainer, you're going to have troubles. The valve's going to pull right through the retainer. I always run the 10-degree. I don't give a fuck if it's a flat tap or hydraulic. The 7 degrees are junk. I don't use them. For the cost of a lock and retainers, I buy the 10s. But that's, when you're looking at parts or whatever, that's, when they ask you about a 7-degree retainer and locks, that's what they're referring to. Is the degree from center line out to your edge. Okay, I'm getting ready to put the heads on. There's no voodoo here. Gaskets are usually marked. It should say up on it somewhere usually. Like right here it says up. Some people like to use a sealant. It's just a spray. I use it. Sometimes I don't use it. It's not a big deal. As long as your block is decked, your heads have been decked, everything's all clean and machined, you shouldn't have a problem. For you guys that want to sand it or use a scuff pad thing on it, I'd recommend using the gasket sealer. Make sure that everything's clean and put it together. Follow your torque specs on your bolts, your recommended torque if you're using ARPs, which is what I'm using. These are brand new bolts, so they're going to be cycled a few times, and what that means, I'm not just going to torque them down and call it done. If it was a used bolt, I would do that. They're fine, but they're new. You need to cycle through because they're going to stretch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to torque this down in the steps that they recommend, like I think 3 different steps, and I'm going to let them set overnight, and tomorrow I'll come in, back them all off, and re-torque them, let them set overnight again, back them off, re-torque them, and call it done. Hey guys, on the head bolts, there's one thing you gotta know. The washers. You notice they got a flat side, and they got a side that's got a chamfer on them. That chamfer goes up towards your bolt head, not down towards your head. Flat side goes to the head, and that's to clear any imperfection on the shoulder up here in the bolt. Okay guys, heads are on, torque down, 70 foot-pounds. A little note here on the center ones. Sometimes you gotta tap that washer in because it'll hit the fucking cups. Or you could even grind flat spots on it so it drops right in. Just want to make a little comment about the new bolts. And where you have to fucking be cycled through a few torque settings. Some of you might have the urge to over-tighten them, to stretch them. And in theory that would work, but the problem is, you're going to over-crush your gasket. So like say you torque them bolts down to 90 pounds, let them set overnight, back them off, torque them back down to 90, let them set overnight, back them off, then go to 70. You're not going to have the proper crush in your gasket because you've already over-crushed it. So, for some of you that actually have a brain that can think a little bit, the idea is there, just don't do it because you're going to have a gasket problem later on down the road. And that's about it. So, like I said, this is going to sit overnight. Then I'm going to back the bolts off, re-torque them. And I'll probably finish doing the rest of the motor, back them off, re-torque them. Then I'm going to dyno it, hopefully. And once I get it off the dyno, I'm going to re-torque them again. I'll back them off, re-torque them to 70 again. Because then they'll go through a heat cycle. They've been under load. They should be fine at that point. It seems like a pain in the ass, but it's something you got to do with new bolts. End of story. Okay, I'm putting the lifters in this right now. When you get your lifters, I know, just like everything else, you think, oh, they're brand new, ready to go, done deal. Don't take that for granted. You take them out, when you untake the sleeves off, always roll the rollers, make sure they turn good, and check them for any imperfections, where somebody might have dropped them or bumped them. You want a nice smooth roller. And wash these really good with a brake cleaner. They're going to have oil on them, so you're going to think they're good to go, but don't. Get in there with brake cleaner. Hold this like that, blast that with brake cleaner, and roll the roller at the same time. And you watch, there'll be a ton of shit come out of it. Once they're clean, blow them off and soak them in oil. Not the whole lifter, because you don't want to fill this up with oil. Just your rollers. What I do is I take 2 paint caps, for like a spray can, put oil in them, set them next to each other, and just drop the lifters in them, kind of like that. And let them sit for a few minutes so the oil gets into those rollers, into your little needle bearings. Then you can put them in. Okay, I'm doing the lifters right now, or the rockers, the adjustment. When you do these, now if you look at your cam box, a lot of the generic ones don't have it, but like comp cams, brand names, they usually have your paperwork and have your procedure on how to do this. So you follow along, you'll be fine. But basically, in a nutshell, when you adjust your lifters, you want to be on the base circle of your cam. And what that is the opposite of the peak of the lobe. This here that's considered the base circle of the cam. Now this is your lobe. This is what gives you a lift, duration. You got your ramps. So when you adjust your lifters, you want to be here. So basically, in a nutshell, if you watch and rotate the motor, and see that lifter closing, and once it closes, and you no longer see movement, you're going to be in this area. So once you get to that point, you roll a little bit more, and you're going to be in this area. And that's when you can adjust your fucking rocker. And you can see the other one just started opening, so now you know that you're on the base circle here. And you can adjust the play out of this. Now what I'm doing is I'm doing zero play, which is in the push rod. There's no up and down movement. I can still twist it. Some people say if you can spin it, you're not at zero. That's bullshit. If there's no up and down movement, you're at zero. Reason being, like right now, I'm at zero. I can spin this push rod fairly easy. I can go past zero and I can still spin it. Just takes a little bit fucking more muscle to do it. So just make sure there's no up and down movement in your push rod and you're at zero. And you should feel resistance while spinning it. Now I do one turn past zero. And that's just simple here. One turn. Then you gotta lock them down. Now in doing this, remember, you're not King Kong. You ain't gonna fucking crank it right down. That's what a lot of people have, is they get these locks too tight. And they're causing a break and whatnot. Also another note, the top of your rocker studs gotta be flat. And a lot of them from the new are not quite flat. So you can either file them flat or have them machine flat. Most good studs like ARPs, those are flat. And the point being, if they're not flat, when you just wind that set screw down to it, it's only going to be contacted on a little spot instead of the whole thing. But anyway, that's all there is to it. Just roll the motor over, watch for your lifter to drop down and stop moving, roll it a little bit more, or just wait for the, if you're doing the exhaust, wait for your intake to open, then you can do your exhaust. Okay, I'm getting ready to put the intake in place. No real trick there. But I do seal the ports and the water jackets. Even if you use like the Indian head shellac, stuff works good. All I do is run some silicone around it, smear it out with my finger, just to help seal the gasket, make sure there's no leaks. Other than that, in each corner, you need to put blobs. I don't run the end seals, I silicone it, but what these blobs are for is to hold the gasket up in place. Keep it lined up. And of course to seal the corners. And get the gasket where you want it. Push it in place around your ports. Do this side. Re-blob the corners. Run a nice good bead along here. And put the intake on and torque it down. Hey, one thing I like to do before I bolt the intake in place is I'll set it in place, and I'll run the distributor down into it, get a little wiggle jiggle, and make sure that everything lines up. Because sometimes if you just put the intake on and bolt it down, sometimes you have a hard time getting the distributor in because the holes don't line up with the holes in the block. So I just tend to put it in, make sure it's lined up, then tighten it down. And when you tighten it down, start from your center and work your way out. There you go, the intake's on, all tightened down. Like I said, just snug them down, starting from the center, working out side to side. Do these two or those two, then come in and do the opposite. Don't come in here and do one side and do the other side. Snug your four centers down. Then come out and do your ends. Then tighten them down, working from the center out. That's it for that right now. I'm going to go get some Allen head bolts for the timing cover and get rid of those fucking hard fitting ones that was in it. Yeah. Okay guys, timing cover's on. You can see I got the Allen head bolts, the regular hardware bolts that were in it. Too hard to get a socket on with the cover. Harmonic balancer install. Buy the tool. They're cheap. They're worth it. Don't bash it on with a couple hammers. Because what you're going to do is, when you're hitting that, not only you're disturbing the glue on your inertia ring, you're driving that crank through the back of the motor in every whack. So you're going to end up fucking up your thrust bearing and who knows what else. Now, the next thing is a timing tab. I cut them. I bring the motor up to 0, then cut the tab so I know my cut mark is at 0. This was actually 4 degrees off, because my cut mark is actually on the 4 degrees before top dead center, which is actually where the 0 lines up. So that's now 0. If I'd have gone with the 0 mark that was on this tab, it'd be wrong. So this is one of those things you got to check. That's it, I guess. I mean, I got to flip it, get the oil pan on, but before I do that, I'm going to check the oil pump that came with the motor. But I think most likely I'm going to buy a new one. For a Chevy, they're too cheap not to buy one. But I will tear his apart and check it. But anyway, we're getting there. Okay guys, I got the new oil pump. I didn't bother taking the other one apart, I just said fuck it, bought a new one. You're more than likely going to do that anyway. Now, before you do these, you do need to take them apart and inspect them. Make sure your top plate's flat. That's flat. You only want like 1/1000th between this and your gears. And before you install it, you need to put your pickup on. I'll talk to you about that in a second. And before you put your cover back on, you need to oil your gears and your shaft where it goes through your housing. See that? One shaft comes right up out. Get some oil on that. A little bit of oil in the gears. You don't have to fill the fucking thing with oil. Just get some lube in there so it's not trying to start dry metal to metal. Now, your top plate, where your pickup goes in, you need to take the pressure spring out, because you're going to need to heat this up a little bit with a torch. One of those will work, and you're going to need to do some welding. So it's real simple. There's a pin here that holds your pressure spring in. You're going to pop that pin out. Take the spring out and take the plunger out. And the reason you're doing that is you're going to heat this up and you're going to weld it, which is create more heat. Heat hurts springs. So the next thing is heating this fucking thing up. These fit tight. But you'll see once it's in that it's not really all that tight. It's easy to move. So you need to tack weld it in place. But before you do that, you got to get it level. And you can see we're kind of going downhill a little bit. We're just going to move that up. And you see we're uphill. And if you look, see how easy that moves? Now that right there doesn't look too bad. Now all I'm going to do is just put a tack weld right here, then bolt this plate back. Okay, there it is. Just a good tack weld is all you need. Put your plunger, your spring, your pin back in. Make sure it's all nice and clean. Put it in place. Okay, it's all back together. As you can see, there's the tack. Now it's just one good hot tack. You don't need to weld around it or get crazy. Just a good tack to stop it from falling off. Put your plunger, your spring, and your pin back in. Bolt it back in place, and that's done. Now it's time for the oil pan. Now as you can see, I've got a nice one-piece gasket. These things are awesome. I wish I had them fucking years ago. And there's the part number. Now this is for a driver's side dipstick. You know, the older motors. The newer ones, what, 80s up, they had them on the passenger side. It's a different gasket, obviously. I don't know the part number on that one right off the top of my head, but they do make them. Now this has a collar, so you fucking guys can't overcrush them and get them leaking. That's the biggest problem with people having oil pan leaks, is they over tighten them. These are nice gaskets. You don't have to dick around with your end seals. So all we're going to do is put a blob of silicone in each corner here and put this thing in place. And I'll probably run a bead up through here on the timing cover and on the rear cap just to be safe. I hate leaks. Then bolt the oil pan on. Alright, again, as I've mentioned in other videos, setting the distributor in, you gotta make sure you just complete your intake stroke. So what I do is, I had the cover off and rotate the motor, and you watch your intake valve open and then close. Then roll your motor till you're back on top dead center, back it up 12 degrees, drop the distributor in. Or you can stop so your zero lines up 12 degrees before top dead center. And as you can see, we are about 10 degrees before top dead center. And that's where I dropped the distributor in. With the distributor marking, with the mark on the distributor for number 1, which is this wire here. So textbook, number 1 is supposed to basically point to number 1. We're up in this general area, and that's how I got it set up. I don't like the wire holders. One of the things I hate about Chevys is the plug wires are always a mess under the hood. So I'm going to try to find some different ones for the guy that run around the back here, then drop down. They'll kind of clean this area up a little bit. I'm going to get rid of this. This is a vented thing, and with the PCV, you're basically just going to suck air in here, through here, down through your valley, and right back through it. It's not going to help seat your rings or nothing. All you're doing is just cycling air. So I'm going to plug this with a solid plug, probably just one of those round ones that say oil, the rubber ones. So I have a functional PCV. That's about it. I mean, I'm waiting on a set of spark plugs. I always put new ones in so I can do a plug reading, but see that crack right? See that line? That dirt line? That's actually cracked porcelain. So this plug's junk anyway. So I'm going to get the guy a new set of plugs. Then call my machinist and see when I can get on the dyno, and hopefully we can get it right on.